Hello, I'm Dr. Rick Chambers, and welcome to this edition of Health, Happiness, and Harmony Partner Training videos. Today we continue the series on Soulwork, and what we'll focus on today is understanding subjective consciousness, the individual psyche, and the best way to do this is there are various components or parts that are organized into wholes. And Ken Wilber's work gives probably the best explanation of holons, or the meaning behind the word holistic. But it's understanding the world in terms of parts organized into larger wholes. And so there's far more information, or there will be more information on each one of these parts of the individual psyche. And a lot of this is also based on the book Parenting and Educating for Wholeness, that also divides the psyche into these parts. There's the physical part, or the self. Within our individual psyche, we can talk about like how we feel physically, or understand that the physical self can be differentiated from the mental self, the emotional self, and usually these are the three categories that people look at. Now, actually, there's not, all of these things coexist, and so they're not actually separate, but in our awareness and attention and language, we can separate them out. One that's not often talked about is the vital self, which is the seat of both our ethics and aesthetics. Then what we're doing, the reason this is essential to understanding soul work, we're using language to differentiate the ego as a self from the soul. And we were talking about that in the last video, but this one expands the individual psyche a little more into more parts. Then, subjective consciousness, the individual psyche, the person is embedded in an environment, environments, relationships, culture and history, and spirit. So it's often good to think about the psyche. Environments, by this I mean like natural environments and nature, but it's also that the biopsychosocial approach, that we're always embedded in our biology in some sense. We're also embedded in our individual relationships. And the postmodern perspective is bringing to light how embedded we are, our perceptions, thoughts, feelings, actions, how embedded we are in culture and history. And then from a spiritual perspective, and you'll notice we differentiate the soul from the spirit. The soul is kind of individual within the person. Spirit, it transcends any individual person and can also be thought of as like an environment that we're in. There's a verse that kind of, in God we live and move and have our being. And so that implies it's more like an environment in which you're embedded in. And so this model of understanding the components of the subjective self and how this relates to being embedded in, and Wilber calls this nesting, nested hierarchies. Parts are within wholes that are within larger wholes. Parts can be subdivided into smaller parts. And it's a dramatically different way of thinking and perceiving the world compared to cause and effect, right and wrong, even the rational way of perceiving the world. But it's also a more biological way of perceiving the world. So thank you very much.